All right. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. Welcome to this Threat Connect roundtable called Beyond the Buzzword, focused on how we're actually leveraging artificial intelligence in threat intelligence. Now, of course, I'm sure you've seen a lot of vendors putting AI features out there, which is great. We love to see it. But we really want to hone in today on some of the actual use cases in terms of how we at Threat Connect are actually thinking through leveraging AI in terms of making your lives better. Just a quick bit of housekeeping. If you do have any questions or want to chime in at any point during this roundtable, happy to make it interactive. Please use the chat feature to the right of your screen. If you want the screen to be bigger, there is a full screen option. But let's go ahead and dive in. So by way of introduction, my name is Dan Cole. I'm the Vice President of Product Marketing here at Threat Connect. I've been with the company almost 10 years. And before we introduce our panelists, I wanted to take a brief moment just to talk about why I feel I am qualified to moderate this roundtable. So, two of my all-time favorite movies, and I know it's a cliche in these things to talk about Terminator when you're talking about AI, but these were genuinely some of my absolute favorite movies. I saw them when I was a kid, and if you've seen them, most people, their takeaway from these films is, it's a chilling reminder of the dangers of AI and the dangers of technology. And will AI replace us, destroy us? Solid takeaway. My takeaway was that it would be super awesome to have my own indestructible robot to, do my dishes, be my best friend. I thought that was the absolute coolest thing. And it wasn't just about, hey, it would be cool to have a neat robot. It was really about the possibilities of artificial intelligence. And I got super into this. So this is the arm of a Terminator, the killer robot from the Terminator movies. This is my actual eighth grade science project. So I went deep into this AI interest, this AI potential. I also got the same haircut that John Connor had in Terminator 2, which was a disaster. I will not be showing an image of that. But even if we look at the movies, as much as they had this theme of, the dangers of AI run amok, there were lots of instances where characters did see the potential of how AI, if properly applied, could be a net good. So the person who actually invented the artificial intelligence used in Terminators, his vision was to have a pilot that never made a mistake, that never got hung over, that was never tired. Imagine how that would improve air travel safety. Even, Sarah Connor, who was out there to save humanity from AI, saw the value of having an artificially intelligent robot companion that could really help and really protect her son. And I think as we go through this webinar, we're going to talk a lot about, yes, some of the pitfalls, as well as some of the potential of artificial intelligence. So full circle, I did not end up going into AI as a career, despite this promising start, but full circle, now I actually get to bring in some actual experts in the field of AI to talk a bit about artificial intelligence. And so we're going to go through three topics once I introduce them. One is, what is actually hype around AI versus what is reality? Like there are a lot of big claims out there. What are we actually seeing in the field? Two is really around use cases. So how are we actually seeing analysts leveraging AI, both from vendors and also possibly independent things like ChatGPT to actually produce better threat intelligence? And then finally, balance. I'm a big believer that AI works best when it's paired with a human companion. And so the question becomes, how do we actually strike that balance in terms of AI and people? So without further ado, I'd like to invite our panelists to come on stage and introduce themselves. And we'll just kind of pass the mic. So Joe Miller, if you'd like to introduce yourself first.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, everybody. My name is Joe Miller. I'm the director of product here for Polarity. Been with Polarity for about 9 years. We recently came on Threat Connect as part of a merger over the summer. We're super excited to be here and see what we can do together with the different products. Previously, and part of the reason I'm here is I spent a lot of time as a data scientist in the intelligence community, working on different platforms and data to help set up for machine learning and things like that, which, AI covers a lot of things nowadays, and machine learning is part of that. So excited to be here and excited to talk about everything.
Awesome. Excited to have you here. Next, I'll pass it on to E. Sneed.
Hey, everybody. I'm E. Sneed, or Sneedy if you're dyslexic. My pronouns are they, them. So I've been doing cybersecurity product management for about 10 years, and I've worked on a lot of scaled systems and AI systems, specifically around phishing detection, both for mobile and email, along with a bunch of other different solutions. And now I focus on data and analytics at Threat Connect, where I specifically work on enhancing threat data with AI, machine learning, and other enrichments as part of the collective analytics layer. Really excited to be here and kind of talk about the features that we're developing, how we're going about it, and get feedback from everybody else of what you think is important, and just have a good conversation.
All right, excellent. And last but not least, Dr. John Snyder.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I'm John Snyder. Originally, I got a doctorate in statistics in the 2010s. Since then, I've worked in various different industries, applying machine learning, AI, whatever folks have been calling it, in any given year. Here at Threat Connect, I've been here for about 4 years now. I manage the data science team we have here, primarily serving Cal, which is our big data layer, so to speak. But I've been engaged with most areas of the business. Building models, making the product better through AI.
Excellent. So without further ado, let's actually dive in and start asking some questions. So the first topic is around hype versus reality when it comes to AI in CTI. So sure, everyone on this call has seen cybersecurity vendors selling AI as a magic bullet, and that's happened even before the advent of LLMs. So what are some of the common misconceptions we see when it comes to things like AI-driven threat intelligence?
I can take this. Yeah. So, I mean, I would say, I've been doing this for a little bit now, and several years ago, the letters AI instead of AI, it was ML, right? Everybody was doing ML. Everybody wanted to do ML. And through the hype that we've seen in various different cycles over the years, ultimately, us folks who are building models and making products better and whatnot, we're just doing stuff, right? But I would say, like, generally speaking, to cut through the hype, like, we have to think about like what AI means. And to me, and others, if you'd like, can speak for themselves. To me, AI is essentially anytime you're building a system where you're trying to model something stochastic, where you don't have a deterministic like path from your input to your output, right? And so essentially, I would say any problem where the outcome is uncertain, we can call AI, right? And trying to find what is the best solution in those cases, I would say. As far as misconceptions go, I mean, like I said, the pitfall a lot of times is to call, say simple if-else statements to be some AI magical like solution. And I think like when we do that, we run the risk of kind of cheapening the power of these tools and where they actually can augment our product experiences.
Excellent. And one thing I heard in there was that notion of uncertain outcomes, and which can be tough in security, because one of the things that we've heard is that a lot of security teams are skeptical of AI because of black box decision making. So we get an outcome, We don't know how we got there. And that can be hard because CTI is very much, I think, a show your work kind of discipline. So who can talk to me a little bit about how here at Threat Connect, we try to focus on AI transparency and explainability in our models?
I can take this, and I think there's a couple of pieces that were kind of interesting in that little piece leading up to like what we're doing. And I think one of the important things in this is you said security teams have skepticism, right? And I think it's important to talk about the difference between an individual using any given LLM or AI product and how they're going to make choices of how that's going to augment their own skill sets versus how you would build things for a team and for workflows, right? And so I think we keep that in mind. So we're trying to both provide that workspace for the analyst, but also create scalable workflows for folks to use and really scale their operations so they can focus on net new things. And so within that, when we come to transparency, what we're trying to do is think about how do you know you can trust this, right? So an analyst using an LLM, they're making choices on the fly. Does this look right based on my experience? Oh, this is something I'm not as good at. They can make those choices, right? But when we talk about scaling things, you really need to be able to show your customers this is why we made these decisions. And so some of the big things I think are important, and we put this together to provide to our customers. Why was the technology selected, right? And so that could be whether it's a specific type of machine learning, whether it's a specific LLM model, what sort of performance does it have? How is it evaluated, right? And how does it compare to other technologies? Were other things looked at? Is it explainable? Is the data that you're using, is its provenance explainable? Do you know where you got it? Was it synthesized? Why do you know you trust that data? Who does it belong to? Where is that data processed and stored, right? And that's very important depending on, especially if you have compliance requirements, GDPR, different risk needs, and then also what ways is that data outputted and validated, right? And that goes not just like, hey, we know this is AI in the UI, but like, hey, how do you really know this is working? How do you make sure this is working over time? And that goes into what is the strategy for maintaining these features, right? And I think this is kind of going back to what John was saying. The difference we had pre-LLM boom is machine learning takes a lot of operational focus to maintain and keep going. So you saw entire detection products, whether it be phishing detection, whether it be network detection, things like that. That was an entire product. And now with how LLMs have come onto the scene and how AI has kind of burst, a lot more folks are into it. You have all of these much smaller little features that you need to maintain. But also, if you want those to be trustworthy and useful, you have to have a plan on how to keep those, how to make sure that those outputs are going to be useful to the end users, how they understand the risk, and how you make that visible. And so we do a lot of work to be able to show that transparency and show that explainability and provide that to our customers, both within the context of like, hey, we need this for compliance, but also as just hey, we want to understand how this works. We're trying to understand, we want to know what this is. And then we take that feedback and we try to put that back into those features so that it's clear for everybody. It's documented and they know what it's doing. And really anybody who's making these features, working in AI, should be able to answer those questions, right? Should be able to explain, this is why our feature works. This is how we know it's trustworthy. And these are the things you need to know when you're using it.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that, like one thing to consider when it comes to products and AI in general, especially as AI is moving, it's moving very, very rapidly in the space, right? Is the transparency around models, what the models are, what they're doing, and the ability to tune is going to be huge in the future, especially when you have agentic AI starting to come into the space and these AI models doing stuff on their own, having the transparency to go in and understand what's happening, be able to tune it, be able to adjust to threat actors that are trying to attack those models, right, and trying to influence those. Having that ability, that transparency there is going to be key as well, and something that we strive for here as we start to develop more and more AI.
Yeah, and I think too, this is also the difference. You see this in a lot of places, and this may get into like other pieces that we're going to talk about. But going back to what John said, in some cases, folks are presenting AI as sort of a brand, right? And I get it if you want to say, hey, this is a lot of automation, we want people to be excited about it. But there is a difference between like a brand and a whole set of features under that some are AI and some aren't. and then like really being able to explain, this is AI, you need to know it's AI, and here's how it works, and this is what you need to know about it. So you can really trust those outcomes and and build those into your pipelines and workflows with trust.
Awesome. So it sounds like, to sort of address, some of that, one of the way to cut through that hype is with sort of that level of thoughtfulness and that level of care, as we get into how these things actually work. And so that's kind of us, thinking as sort of a vendor. But, when we think about like an actual CTI or security team, what are some of the actual biggest risks that they're going to face when they deploy AI? Like, how can organizations avoid falling into that that over-reliance trap when it comes to those AI generated insights? So like, how do they avoid some of that internal hype, if you will?
I think, and I'm not sure if anybody else has some other items to add to this, but I do think it's important to understand the hype can be good, right? So I think it's important to understand that AI, or at least the way I like to think about it, is AI is there to help you automate kind of mundane tasks that are not using the best of your brain power, right? So so that you don't have to know everything, and your ability to trust that that's happening. And so it's supposed to free up the analyst to really leverage their subject matter expertise so that they can identify new and novel things. And that's important because AI is built upon past data. So it can help you come to conclusions about new novel threats, risks, things like that. But it's not going to automatically find those until it is trained and set up to do that, right? And so we were always going to need analysts to be thinking and kind of looking at where that new horizon is, and then leveraging those tools. So I think a big risk is assuming that the AI can detect everything, assuming that the analysts aren't going to know as much as the AI, and then also I think just remembering that those AI models, those AI tools, they're built on data so that they can find things really well that have happened before, but those are also based on biases, right? And so they aren't going to be able to find those novel things. But also, if we've made an assumption about how something should work, and the space changes, then it's going to be built on those biases. It's going to have a hard time finding those things. So you're still going to need to understand where your human expertise needs to be versus where AI is augmenting and enhancing those workflows and enhancing those analysts to do even more.
Yeah, and I'll add and kind of build on a little bit from the transparency piece from the last question is some of the biggest pitfalls that are gonna happen when it comes to AI are gonna be centered around the lack of transparency, right? Like when you don't know what's happening with the model, when you don't know when a threat actor has come in, has influenced the model and has influenced the data that's making the wrong decisions for those agents, right? When you don't have that transparency, it's going to be huge. So that also being able to tune and adjust, because threat actors it's going to be real. It's already started, right? We've already started to see in this space that threat actors are now attacking models, right? I think it happened with DeepSeek not too long ago, and people found ways around it to get to the database, right? Like this is going to be a thing more and more, especially as more and more agentic AI starts to come on board. So making for sure and holding us as people who develop products, right? That again, that transparency is built in. There's not a black box around it. There's not just this solves everything for me. I can turn it on and don't have to worry about it ever again. That's not going to be the case in most realistic aspects, right?
And I think that's a really good point. And I think it's also important to realize where different teams and companies are coming from. I think, for larger enterprises, kind of more mature security teams, the folks on those teams know a lot of this, right? They know this instinctively. This is not new to them. But I do think that depending on where those teams are, where those companies and those teams are with the maturity, with forming those teams, AI can seem like a silver bullet. It's like, oh, it'll just solve everything, right? It'll just do all this. And so it's really, that is a hype that needs to be looked at critically when you're building out your security needs and building out your compliance needs, because it probably can help a lot. But again, it really just depends on how your organization is positioned, what its risks are, what its threats are, and how that works with your analysts and your security teams and how they are structured within your organization.
Excellent. And I really like that notion of, humans not making assumptions about the AI. And I think we're gonna dive into that a little bit more a bit later on. One last question before we move on to the next topic, which really focuses on kind of real world applications. And this is kind of like a geek out kind of question. But earlier on, one of you talked a bit about machine learning versus LLMs. So we kind of think about LLMs, including sort of the evolution to agentic AI. We talk about LLMs being able to do everything for a business. So I'd like to kind of back up a little bit. Can you or can someone talk a bit about what is the role of an LLM versus traditional machine learning when it comes to AI, and how do we kind of approach that at Threat Connect?
Yeah, I would say that essentially, anytime you need to synthesize information, that's really where LLMs they really are very powerful, right? Sometimes if your problem is you need to know, we'll talk about this a bit later. You have an input like sentence or something, you want to know like which MITRE ATT&CK technique this sentence may be referring to. You have a fixed set of outputs there. That would be a more traditional machine learning problem. Versus like say you had a mountain of blogs you could potentially read that day of all the things going on in the space, potentially in your industry, et cetera. And you need to know individually, are the topics that are being discussed in these articles relevant to me and my organization, right? That's not a problem you can answer with a simple yes, no. That's very hard, right? And so, to answer that type of question, one would establish some criteria for what matters to me. And then through that information that we have, you can then pull in the blog's text and then extract some metadata that is relevant to an organization that they can use to make that decision very quickly, right? And to me, that's where the power of these large language models, that's where they come in. Synthesizing lots of text, summarizing, extracting metadata that would be very hard to extract otherwise, that we could then use to make decisions with. Yeah, and
Excellent. And I think you really sort of closed, kind of brought things full circle to that notion of cutting through the hype and the thoughtful approach that Threat Connect takes. I think a lot of companies have the problem of, they're going to start with we want AI, and then they're going to look for a problem. They're going to look for a use case. Whereas, we take a really hard look at what problems do CTI teams face. So, we look at something like intelligence collection. And then we ask, is intelligence collection something that can be made better with AI? If yes, we're going to pursue it. If no, we're going to move on to the next thing. And so with that, let's actually switch to the next topic.
I was going to...
Oh, go ahead.
I just want to double down on that. I think that's such a good call out, and I think everybody experiences this differently, right? Folks are getting to a solution because they want to use a technology before they know what problem they're solving, right? And I think that's such an important call out because the AI technology is really exciting, and it has so many options. Oh, we could do this, we could do that. And so like when you're, and again, I think this applies both within product development. I think it also applies within security teams that are looking to try to solve tough problems, right? And so just to double down on that, it is very easy to say, well, I have this, I could use it for these things, versus saying like, I need to solve this problem. And like an example of our beta TQL generator, right? It's really hard for folks to learn and specialize in SQL TQL for the platform, right? That is an extra skill set that is great if you have it, but if you don't, it is a real challenge to get over to get to the data you need. So really pinpointing like what is going to help analysts get there, what is going to help them focus on the things that are important for them to specialize in. That is a really good point. And I think just to double down on that, I think is so important as security teams think about what am I trying to accomplish and not getting lost in the, well, I could use this or this technology would be cool or whatnot. It still can be, but again, really think about what you're trying to solve.
Definitely. Awesome. So speaking of what you're trying to solve, one of the things that we see a lot of teams struggle with is the balance between efficiency and effectiveness. So, the next question is, how does AI improve the speed of analysis while also ensuring accuracy. So like maybe one thing that I think would be good to look at there is, can you think of a real world example where AI helped reduce response time?
Yeah, I can take this one from folks. Definitely a really good question, because that's what everybody wants, right? They want AI to just solve all these problems quickly for me, and I don't have to think about it. But that's not gonna be the case, right? AI is there to help speed up in a lot of ways. One of the ways, and to answer your second question there, Dan, directly, right? Like a real world example would be how in Polarity, right, we have the ability to quickly summarize context and add that to a report, add that to a ticket, right? Like it's in within seconds, right? You can get a quick idea, a quick summary of that information, add it to a report, and bam, right? You can move on with your day, close that ticket, whatever that piece you need to do is. This isn't pure like LLM AI, and John, don't murder me, but like when you look at the Cal data here, right? Like how Cal collects the data and comes up with the score is another huge thing when it comes to talking about AI and how it's going to help speed it up, because it gives you an idea of, does this matter? Does this not matter to me? And I can prioritize it. I can not prioritize it, and I can move on quickly, right? And you're going to start to see with that prioritization piece. And I know one of the things that we'll hopefully be looking at here with IDO and stuff in the future is can the AI actually just prioritize this for me, right? We know all the scores, we know the data, right? Have it prioritize me, give me that thing. Hey, I need to look at this. I need to look at this. I need to look at this, right? That tells me immediately, here's the things that matter to me and how I can go start my day without having to drill through everything as much as possible. So AI is really going to help there. And to answer the like kind of second of the three questions, right? It's going to help speed up, but not be the solution, because humans still need to be there, right? Humans still need to validate that prioritization, because we can look at a score from 6 different systems from threat intelligence, right? And say, hey, yeah, this is malicious. This is really bad, or we think it is. But in your environment, we might not know that. We might know that you guys have already taken action on this information, right? You guys have already blocked this. It's already part of your firewall, whatever that is, right? So that human still needs to be there to evaluate and understand that information. There's a lot of other ways AI will help speed up in the future, right? Like agents are going to start coming into play a little bit more, where some of this stuff is going to be done auto magically. I'll call it auto magically, because again, it gets to that, oh, this is a black box thing, which is what we don't want to get to, right? But you're going to have like vulnerabilities, and being able to understand the vulnerability, and does this affect me? Does this not affect me in my organization, right? AI is going to be able to start helping to answer those problems for us to speed up our everyday lives.
Awesome. Great answer. I love that notion of the human still needs to be there. Like a customer said to me a few months ago that having an LLM is like having the world's fastest intern, which is great. But if it were a human intern, I would still check their work. And having one that's super fast, so much the better. You mentioned the notion of prioritizing. And certainly one of the key ways that we prioritize a lot of things is with MITRE ATT&CK. Are these TTPs extra relevant to our assets, our organization? Now, of course, to actually prioritize things by attack, you need to first classify things by attack. So does this particular intel report actually relate to spear phishing, for example, which I think is like T1192? So thank you. Someone check that. One of the things that we do at Threat Connect is our attack classification identifies 4 times more attack techniques than traditional methods. So we can take plain text and pull out, hey, this text is talking about T1192, and then we can actually then use that to prioritize. So how does that classification work, and why is that an advantage for us?
So our AI powered MITRE ATT&CK labeler, I'll call it, essentially not only tells you which techniques are mentioned in an article, but also specifically where they are in the article, essentially doing sentence level classification of the entire document and to which portions of that are relating to different techniques. It's powerful, more powerful than traditional ways. I mean, traditionally one may look for a literal technique code being mentioned, which essentially is going to rely on whoever constructed that article to do that work and say like, what technique is this, right? And so that string that's T whatever, or specifically the name of the technique may not be present, right? Someone in an article may be referring to, hey, we observed somebody throwing spaghetti sauce at our mainframe, right? Like what technique is that, right? But it doesn't mention a code, it doesn't mention a name, right? And so we need to take that portion of that text and we need to figure out what the technique code is. And so that's why the machine learning approach for this particular solution is the one that we employ, because there's a fixed set of outputs for the MITRE ATT&CK technique space. And so we use an approach for that. Additionally, the part of this that is powerful is that anyone can throw together a classifier, right? Like you can throw together and say which of the whatever 600 or so techniques is the sentence referring to. But at Threat Connect, the way our model works is it goes through without going through too much, but a post-processing step that ensures the classification that a customer ends up seeing, if you see it in an article, has a very high degree of precision in its accuracy. And so we went to great depths to make sure that there wasn't noise in this process, that we weren't like throwing a bunch of stuff in there that wouldn't stand the test of time, right? So much of the work that we've done on this has been to ensure a high degree of precision in the outputs for that. So yeah, that's roughly why I would say this technique is so powerful. This project anyway.
And I want to call back to what we were talking about with the transparency and understanding how features work. Like part of the research we did in developing the pipeline for training this data and getting it out there and making it so you could classify was also comparing it to other examples of what other groups had done and looking at what was working and what was not working. And what we saw was that it was almost approached kind of similar to phishing, like we can't miss anything. So even if it's of probably low probability, include it. But that ends up putting a lot of work back on the analysts, right? And so we were able to look at those, really understand what worked and what could be improved, and really make a really, what I think is just a great feature that tries to be precise and really give you trustworthy results that you would not find unless it was explicitly labeled in a report, right? So to really help analysts.
Awesome, thank you. And I did check. 1192 used to be spear phishing, but
I wasn't going to say it.
in the current version, it is 1566.
Yeah.
So back in time, I was correct. Anyway, so that sounds like a really powerful way to actually bring the data in and classify it. And I think, like you said, sort of precision is a really important aspect of that. Like if you've got a specific TTP that you're really keen on, it is a high priority. You want to make sure that it's not been discarded, like it's been missed, or you don't want to be bringing in irrelevant data that just looks like something you might care about. So once the data is classified, there's still a lot of threat data out there. So how does the AI actually help with that prioritization so that once analysts don't get lost in the noise?
I can speak to some other elements of our platform that we have for that. I mean, speaking about specific entities that may be extracted from reports, say where we've mentioned specific techniques, we also will score those, right? And the scoring of the various different types of indicators that we have are AI enhanced. We have various different AI models that are evaluating the behaviors of indicators that use to drive an indicator score up or down, right? And we quantify that, and we actually explain it to the user why a score is what it is. What are the drivers of that? Additionally, I kind of touched on blogs before. Rather than sifting through a mountain of articles every day, you can read. We provide summaries, and we're doing what we have on the roadmap. A lot of initiatives to enhance those summaries based on the content of the blog. So, instead of having to read, all of these articles, you could be able to get the most relevant bits that are relevant to you and specifically derive from the blog's content as well. Anybody else have anything they want to add to that?
Yeah. I'll talk about kind of like expand upon what we're looking at right in the future. Because when it comes to AI and it comes to a mass amount of data, one of the things that AI is going to hopefully help with, right, is making sense of all that data and being able to now prioritize it for our customers, right? So one of the things we're starting to look at from a roadmap kind of future AI development is, can we understand who you are as a company, what matters to you as a company, so that helps to prioritize, hey, you're company A, you are in industry Y. We know that these threat actors attack company A and these threat actors attack industry Y, and we know these TTPs matter, and we can understand, hey, these actors are associated with these indicators, right? So can we automatically take that, map that to you as a customer, and then prioritize those indicators and take a look at across our platforms, right? Does this affect me? Does this not affect me? So I can know this is a priority, this is not a priority. So there's a lot of really, really awesome things that's going to come in the future with AI, especially what we're going to start doing.
Yeah, I'll add one more item to this. So one of the features we have is the automated threat library, ATL, which is a cal feed that comes in that is a bunch of security blogs that are out there, and it gets pre-processed. And originally, when this is coming in, the news is so dense on breaches and exploits and things coming in every day. Trying to figure out based on a headline whether you should read something or not is really, really tough. So we introduced, just to start, AI summaries. We got a lot of good feedback of how much that's really helped analysts quickly kind of scan and decide what's important. But we're looking at taking that kind of a next level and looking at things like, can we get more information about the topics at hand so that folks can use those kind of levers to pivot and see. So for example, can we determine if it is about a 0 day so that folks can very clearly get clear summaries about that 0 day, but also get labels or ways to pivot with that to say, hey, I need a prioritized list of anything that comes in with this sort of information, and then has those summaries that are very specific to those use cases that help people say, this relates to me, this doesn't, or look at those relationships that are built, because when we process this, we do a lot of mapping. We pull out all of the indicators, we do all of this. So there's a lot of different pieces you could put together for really like customized prioritization of not just indicator, not just at that technical indicator level, but also strategically, what does the organization need to bring in, both from an operational level and to help package for their stakeholders that need, so they can make decisions and kind of pivot as the world changes at a pretty fast pace every day.
Excellent. So I think that all those comments really just highlight a lot of the power that AI can have. And I appreciate the call out to some of the ways that we are actually applying it in the platform. And Joe, I appreciate it. It sounded you were both sort of teasing some upcoming features. So definitely more and more AI is coming, again, aligned to those use cases. So let's move to our final topic, which is all about balance. And so you talk about prioritizing things, summarizing things. AI can still make mistakes. Take it from me, do not use an LLM to help with your taxes. So with that balance of AI and human, how do you actually incorporate that human feedback to refine the AI over time?
I'll take this. And so just to give this a little bit of background. So prior to my work here, I've been working on kind of scaled detection systems, right? Anti-phishing, both for mobile and non-mobile. And so some of those were just incredibly scaled systems that did not really leverage AI. And then others were AI-specific systems that looked at that. And what I would say is, even in those cases, all the way up until this point, right, your machine learning and your AI systems, entire products, not just sub features, right? They're never going to get it right. And so it's a matter of helping people understand, like, you're making choices and automations based on these things, right? But if you do not get that feedback, in all of these cases, you have to design in human feedback for folks to say, this isn't right, you need an adjustment. That's the only way that your product can really move forward and pivot quickly enough to stay up with the threats, right? And so designing those feedback systems into the product from the start so that it can become easy for the customer to say, this isn't right, you need to make a change. I don't like, I don't see how this works. And we're doing that. And so again, going back to humans are important, analysts are important. It's important to help them focus on the right problems, right? So that they are not getting distracted by distracting AI or tools that are only half working or things that degrade over time, right? So building those features in and then having those operations where you're monitoring and you're looking at those things to make sure that these things are staying high quality is a really important step in the process. And so those refinements happen over time. And so as we build out more and more like distinct AI features, we're making that easier and easier, not just to look at the analytics behind it, right, and make decisions, but also to make it very, very easy to call out and prioritize on our side. These need change, right? This is definitely causing a problem, and we can, or this, maybe it's not a problem, maybe it's something you never thought about. So for example, one of the funnier ones I thought with TQL generator was we started running into a problem where folks were like trying to get to like a threat rating, but people kept calling it skulls. And so the LLM did not know that it was in the UI that it looked like skulls, right? And that's a very small thing, but it's really frustrating if you're in the middle of trying to get something done and you don't know the language of whatever the system is. And so again, some of these refinements are really, really fast detection-based refinements. Like, man, how do we get those cycles in so like we can make adjustments like on the fly? Others are how do we adjust and improve the UX of these systems because maybe they have the capability, but we didn't think about how someone might reference something, or we didn't think about the context that they're looking at. And so getting that feedback so that we can make those adjustments is really, really important, so that it continues to be valuable.
This is also not a new topic either. I mean, ML ops, AI ops, machine learning operations, AI operations. I mean, it's kind of a core tenet in there, right? Is you have a model lifecycle, you monitor performance, and then you make subtle tweaks, and then you see how did engagement change, right? This is a very important thing because models drift over time, right? Whether it's a prompt, and you got to tweak the parameters or modify the prompt a little bit, or if it's a traditional model, right? Sometimes data will drift over time. You have to modify that or monitor that, make adjustments, capture the engagement after you make that change to make sure that things are moving along seamlessly.
I think that's a really good point because even it's these are very different than there's a lot of really good data processing features out there in the platform and whatnot. AI features are a little bit different in that, cool, I've launched it, right? And you're like, it will work forever. But the inputs change, right? Like if we think of an example that's like outside of threat intelligence, right? As Google became more popular, SEO became more popular, and so how websites present data to you changed, right? And so if you had a feature that was looking at that and trying to process what was important about that prior to that shift, right? The input changes and maybe it's not as accurate. Maybe you need to make adjustments. But as environments change, as those inputs change, you've got to evolve with it, and you've got to be able to have the sensors out there to see what is happening so you can make those adjustments and keep things going and valuable and working well.
And that's also, like, to build on that a little bit further, that's also just where users come into play, right? Like direct feedback. Hey, something is funky with this, something is not funky with this works great, right? Direct feedback is key when it comes to AI and how humans interact with this. So that tells us immediately, this is bad. We need to go match this. Hey, if we had the ability, right, to say, hey, this isn't matching on skulls, we need to update skulls, and somebody told us that, it would make that speed. It would speed that process up that much further, right? So direct human feedback is key.
And I do want to make a distinction here in case anybody in the audience is getting annoyed. Like, I do not mean that the end user should be making all of the test cases for a product, right? Like, I think that's really just a thing to point out, because like you as part of your plan should have an extensive set of tests that are like, will it go wrong in these cases? Here's all of the things I can find, right? But again, data drifts, right? Your inputs drift. Again, non-deterministic types of solutions. So your outputs are going to change too. And so there's some things that we can test and have alerts on and identify early within the system. But again, sometimes when it comes to subject matter pieces, oh, well, we delivered 200 words and it's a summary. It's like, well, but this other thing, something's wrong here. And then we can go back and look and make those changes, right? And I think that's an important piece so that you can respect your customers and respect their time, because that is the point of these AI solutions. It is to help end users focus on the right things. And if you're not doing that, right, like that's, you're wasting their time, you're wasting everybody's time.
Excellent. And I just love that notion of feedback. I think that, going back to the magic bullet comment, anyone who considers AI to be that magic bullet, that's a red flag. But the fact that we include these feedback mechanisms, that to me is a really big green flag to help evolve these things over time. And to your point, E, about, we're not just using our users as test cases. Like, I know personally that when we developed our AI to classify by industry, you manually read through something like 700 different blogs just to help validate that the AI was producing those more precise, those more accurate outputs.
Well, it was not just looking at those outputs, but it was also looking for other test cases that we needed to set up to say, under what circumstances is this going to create like funky outputs? And we came up with controls to make sure that we were giving folks the best information we can. And as we continue to work through, we're actually scheduling an update of the model. And I am really excited about the work that's going into this. I think we'll have it in our next release or so. But like, we're going to have even better outputs for that, right? And so like having that at the beginning, having those test cases, knowing what that is, and then being able to, when you make those updates, say, well, we know this is better because of this, and we're getting the feedback because of this. Those all work really, really well.
Awesome. Looks like we've got time for 2 more questions. So, with all that in mind, how are we making sure that ThreatConnect's AI is enhancing human analysts in their intelligence workflows?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? I mean, a lot of it kind of goes back to what we discussed a little bit ago that E went through, right? It's ensuring that we're being transparent with our models, as I'm trying to mix words together here. Being transparent, collecting that feedback, right? And then ensuring that what we're working on from the AI aspect is and takes into account our customers, right? Like making for sure this feature, this update is something anybody wants, they need, they want to use, right? That's a huge piece to it, because if we just develop some AI that we don't think that nobody's going to use, right? We're just developing AI, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think we saw that with the beginning, the beginning when we saw, all of the chatbots that showed up in the world, right? Like chatbots everywhere for everybody. And so like, chatbots can be really useful, right? But like, you really have to be clear on what you're trying to solve, right? That they're reliable, right? You need to make sure that they're providing the right information. You need to do those things. And so I think, again, like to your point, it is, I think going back to some of the earlier pieces we were talking about, I really think that it's really about what is the problem you're trying to solve, right? And then what are the right tools to solve that? And really identifying like, those pain points to get there, right? There's a lot of things that AI can do. And I think keeping it focused on like, again, thinking about, hey, I'm an analyst, I'm just going to use this tool kind of free form in a way that I get to choose versus, and I think those workspace tools are really, really important versus when we're designing things for a workflow that needs to be flexible, that needs to be able to hit the needs of a bunch of different ways that teams work, different organizational needs, things like that, and really making sure that you're hitting a clear need that will help teams scale, right? And that is reliable and transparent and that they can trust.
I think like also, the idea of AI enhancing the subject matter expertise of our customers is sort of, in my opinion, going to be the natural order of things for a while, right? I mean, as a personal anecdote, with my own deep subject matter expertise. So I mentioned in the beginning, I have a doctorate in statistics, right? I'm a statistician by training, right? Just yesterday, I was analyzing some data we got. We were, deciding between a few different model configurations for a new feature that we're developing. And I was like, this is a very simple statistical analysis. I don't want to do this. I'm like, hey, ChatGPT, models A, B, C, and D. These are the results. Do a statistical analysis. And then I continue working on my slides to deliver the update to the product. I look at it a few seconds later, and I was just like, this is a very simple analysis. I just didn't want to write 15 lines of code that it would take to do it. And it was completely incorrect. Like offensively wrong, right? I mean, very simple thing, junior, sophomore in college level, problem. And it was completely did a completely wrong path, right? And so, of course, with prompting, I tell it to correct itself, and it does, right? But the fact of the matter is, left to its own devices, it's not going to be able to answer that question, right? So we need to make sure that we're always working to enhance the professional lives of the customers.
Well, and I think, again, that's a really good example of, using that LLM within your own personal workflow, and you have the choice of whether to accept those outputs, right? Versus building something that is not defined enough and then trying to put it into workflows that are trying to scale, where folks may or may not have the expertise to say this is wrong, right? That is a key piece of when we're looking at what we're developing and developing these features, really making sure that we're keying in on, so that we're not sending somebody down a path that, like, they're just like, I didn't know that this bridge stopped and what went off the end of it, right? Like, we want to make sure that those tools are really focused so that they have the right guardrails, so that people are getting the right thing, and that
You have to be able to trust like, what's coming out of this, right? Like that's so important. I mean, yeah, like everybody knows that these tools hallucinate, right? Like we've all experienced it, like probably at least twice a week. And so, we have to make sure that there's sufficient validation. We've done sufficient work to make sure that the data flowing into these things and the questions that we're asking are on target, and just to ensure the highest level of trust that's possible with these models.
Yeah.
Excellent. And then, John, at one point you talked about sort of staying the course for the foreseeable future. For our final question, let's talk about the future, and let's actually go back to Terminator. So in the movies, the Terminators are sent back in time from the year 2029. So, when they have the flash forwards, that's like the post-nuclear apocalypse. Future war is the year 2029. And it's a little depressing to think, but that's 4 years from now. So how do you see AI evolving between now and the year 2029? What advancements or shifts should security teams prepare for between now and 2029?
What's to take it first?
John, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, as a joke, I can say I always tell ChatGPT thank you, just in case. I mean, from my perspective and the problems that I solve, I see the models getting bigger, more reasoning type models. That's becoming the thing. Like when I think about one of the projects I mentioned was that we have summaries for blogs that you may read. When we first launched that feature, the sort of APIs that you can use to call these models were in their infancy. We didn't have access to that at the time. And so we were using like Llama 2 at the time, which was we were hosting on a server on AWS. And that was the only way we could really do it at the time. A year and a half later or whatever, we're able to use these APIs now and get much better results. I mean, I see this trend continuing. We're going to have access to larger models with more capabilities. And I think like we all have to be, in my opinion, optimistic about this and think about how we will exist alongside these tools to make our productivity better. Realize that there are always going to be feedback loops to make the things better. And to me, it's very exciting generally. I mean, just even when I would see it in the the projects that we would develop here at Threat Connect, the problems that we can solve now are ones we wouldn't have been able to solve 5 years ago. And I think in the next 5 years, we'll be able to solve even more problems for customers. But at every stage of the way, our jobs are going to evolve and how we interact with the tools is going to evolve. So I think we all have to keep that in mind as well as we go forward.
Yeah. You want to take it or I can go next? It's up to you.
I've got an answer, but it's a little bit more boring. Yeah. So I feel like
all right. Go ahead. You're fine.
All right. Okay. No. So I think there's a couple of things. So one, kind of the more fun of the two, kind of just bouncing off of what John is saying. Like, I think one of the things that's going to be interesting, not just for security teams, but for everybody. But I think the amount of data that security teams need to go through on a daily basis makes them a unique case compared to a lot of other types of roles. I think we're going to see, we've built a lot of these very, very big apps. I think that the way we interact with applications is going to change a lot. Like, I think the way that user interfaces are going to evolve is going to be very different. So before, everything was these very static answers. So we need a button for here and a drop down and a filter and this and that. You're going to see a lot. I think we're going to see a lot more dynamic interfaces, right? Because you're going to have to, it's going to be about interacting with that data in a totally new way, right? And I think that's going to be really neat, but it's also going to be confusing because you won't have that same visual, that same layout that you do every time. How do you know that this other person saw the same thing that you did, right? So it's going to be really, I think there's going to be some really interesting evolution in user experience and user interaction. But also it's gonna also have to like take into account like, how do you know if you're seeing the same thing as everybody else? And I think it's going to be very, very neat. That's the more exciting of the two, right? The other thing I think is going to be kind of growing, and this is because on my like product side and security side, there's a thing called AI Security Posture Manager, which is like tools and practices and processes for securing AI-related resources, which I'm seeing pop up with a lot more kind of leading security vendors. And I think that what we're going to see, so right now we're, AI is wildly popular. None of the questions that you get for compliance are the same. Everybody's got a different way. Nobody quite knows what it is. So I think we're going to see a lot more alignment of like, what do you need to do as an organization to make sure that the AI that you're using is safe for your organization, right? What risks are you doing, taking into account, and how are you posturing for that? And I think that's important from like not just your security team and protecting your organization, right? But also on the other side, that your vendors are taking that into account and really understanding how they fit into your security posture when you're also doing a security mission. So,
Yeah, totally agree. And on my end, right, and how I look at AI in the next 4 years or so, I think one of the big things for cybersecurity teams is that you'll see a lot of security practitioners have to understand AI a little more. Right. You'll have to understand how models are working, how this is tuned, because it's going to be another thing that can be attacked. It's going to be another thing that you will in the future have to look at and have to tune and work with. Right. And just as a part of everyday job. I also think this doesn't just apply to cyber. I think this applies to really like a lot of spaces in the world, to be honest, because we have to evolve, and AI is going to be one of those evolving tools. To kind of talk to what John was saying earlier, right, is we need to know to work with this, how to work with it, what it's going to do to make our lives better, right? One of the other things that I think is going to happen in the next 4 years is there's agentic is a hot topic. Everybody's saying the word agentic. Everything's going to be agentic. I do think you're going to start seeing agents pop up a lot more, right? Like that's going to be a thing where this platform talks to this platform and takes an action, does this thing, prioritizes this, right? You have an agent that's running, that's doing these different mundane tasks that other people would do, right? It's looking at this and prioritizing it or summarizing it for me when I don't have to do that, right? So you're going to see agents pop up a lot more. Another prediction is that you're going to see AI cyber attacks on the increase probably in a few years. It's going to be a big thing. So you'll probably have risks, people accepting risk for AI go up and then start to go down a little bit when it starts to get hacked a little bit more. And as the community evolves with it, you'll start to see those risks in AI be accepted more and more when it comes to it. And it's not even to mention quantum stuff. We won't even get into quantum, which now there's like Microsoft and Amazon supposedly have quantum chips. And you want to talk about speed when it comes to LLM. If that's actually true, that'll be crazy what will happen in the future. I can't even go down that path.
Yeah, the model supply chain is going to be huge. I mean, I several years ago seeing talks about how you can fine tune like triggers into models, and have them yield an expected malicious output for a trigger input. And so people are going to have to be really careful about where they're getting their models from. So that aspect of this is going to be very important. Yeah, security for AI, I guess you call it.
Yes.
It's going to be exciting though. I mean, the AI world is cool. It's an exciting space that's evolving a little too fast, but.
Well, exciting is good. I mean, where Terminator is a chilling portent of things to come, it definitely sounds like you are a lot more optimistic.
That's just why we have to say thank you. And when we tell it in our prompts, we either say, "Hey, you are amazing," right? You got to butter it up a little bit.
You're awesome,
for sure.
Thank you so much.
Exactly.
Just
right?
like
we can't just treat it badly. You can't just be like, "Go do this for me." No, you got to be like, "Hey, please, can you do this?" Right? You got to coerce it and guide it.
Exactly. A little kindness goes a long way. All right, so we are just about out of time. I do want to thank our panelists very, very much. This has been super insightful. I hope our audience, who I also want to thank, has gotten a lot out of this as well. Just a quick bit of housekeeping. There should be a resources tab here. So if you do want to download a PDF that goes a little more in depth on how Threat Connect specifically leverages AI, you can do that. There will also be a little pop-up that comes up that you can use to dive a little deeper and learn a little bit more about Threat Connect, so you can request a demo. And we do have more of these events coming up. So definitely head to threatconnect.com, stay tuned, and I hope everyone has a wonderful AI-driven rest of your week. We'll be back.
Have a good one, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.